Hey guys, and welcome to this tutorial. My name's Fletcher, and I'll be showing you how to paint this awesome tree lord from Age of Sigmar. I'll be showing you the full process of painting it, with a focus on how to use the airbrush throughout the project to create a great result. As you can see, I primed the mini in white. So the first step is to lay down a base coat. So we're going to start with putting some airbrush thinner into my airbrush cup, followed by a generous amount of Dawnstone, as you can see. I don't really have a ratio for this. It's just a milky consistency, and it's something that you guys need to get used to get confident with airbrushing. But yeah, just aim for a milky consistency, and it's a case of trial and error to get good coverage. I'm shooting at about 35 psi. I'm just going to cover the entire model with this Dawnstone. After that, I'm going to start working on some shadows and also some transitions that we're going to go into all the branches on his body. So first we're going to add some Dawnstone and filler into the airbrush, followed by some dryad bark there. Can mix that up nicely. We put some Dawnstone in to mix our dried bark in, so it retain the value of the first base coat. And we're just going to aim to where the branches are starting on that grey body there, because we're going to transition from the grey armour into the brown branches, and eventually we'll go to green and then blue. But for now, we're just laying it over the top of this grey armour. Take your time with this, and then this will be the finished result of that step. The next one, going to put some more airbrush thinner in, and we're going to highlight the armour with some Celesta Grey. So again, aiming for a milky consistency with 35 psi on the airbrush, using the backflow technique to mix the paint with the thinner. And we're just going to do specifically aim for like the raised areas on the armour there, like the top of the wrist, the forearm, the chest, the knees, etc. Just make sure not to go too much, otherwise you'll blast out the Dawnstone we did in the first step. And this is the result, as you can see. We're also going to do these same steps to the face that I haven't glued on yet, just purely, I'll show you why later. But those 3 steps I applied to the face at the same time. So we're going to add some Gorthor Brown and thinner into our airbrush cup again. The backflow technique to mix it, going for milky consistency. And we're going to start going further up the branches you can see on the mini. Just going to start blocking in the colours now. Be careful of how you aim this, so we're getting a bit closer to the model with a gentle trigger control, and kind of aim the airbrush so it's not going to hit the grey armour. As you can see, I kind of position the airbrush model so it's just going to go onto the branches there. And this is the result. Next, we're going to apply a wash. So I'm going to get my artist palette out and start with a few drops of Army Painter Dark Tone, a few drops of Army Painter Strong Tone, a generous amount of Quick Shade Mixing Medium from Army Painter. This is going to help the wash flow nicely across the model, give that a nice mix there, as you can see. And also we're going to add some Flow Improver just to enhance the flow even more, and put some in that spare palette there, so next to it, in case I need to do some emergency cleanups. Yeah, going even more with the Flow Improver. I don't want to make the wash too heavy. Just gonna resaturate a bit with that dark tone, and then yeah, we're ready to go on the model. So I'm using a Citadel large shading brush here, and I'm just going to dollop it pretty generously all over the areas we painted so far. And what you can see I'm doing here is kind of cleaning up the excess of wash where it pulls too much. And I'm going to basically just do this across the entire model. Be active when you're doing this. Don't just slap it underneath to dry. Make sure to clean up the wash as it's drying to avoid any coffee staining. And this is the wash across the whole model. Also done the same to the face. So next we're going to start blocking in the Under Armour. So we're going to add some contrast Talisar blue and some contrast Achromatic blue in about a 50-50 mix in my artist palette, adding a bit of thinner to make it flow nicely. And this is, you need quite a precise brush for this. So I'm using a size 2 here, an Element Regiment brush. I'm going to very carefully block in the Under Armour of the model. Take your time with this because we spent a bit of time getting that grey armour nice already. So don't be afraid to get in there. We can clean up afterwards if needed, but yeah, take your time with this. This is just going to... Contrast is a great way of doing our base coats quickly and easily because it flows really nicely off the brush, as you can see. We're going to go across in all the Under Armour, all like the joints, around the neck here, on the neck, on the legs, the knee joints here, the torso, some bits on the torso, which you'll see now. So here it was all the Under Armour done with our contrast mix. Wait for that to dry completely, and we're going to start blocking in the main layer of the Under Armour with Bauerhof blue, which I've loaded up onto my wet palette here. Thinned out a little bit of water, but now we're going to go over all that the first layer of contrast we did, but leaving the recesses showing, which will be a darker blue. We're going to need 2 or 3 layers of this Bauerhof blue, and this will be the most time-consuming part of the process, but it will be worth it. Again, be careful when you're blocking in this colour. Going to go back to our Talisar blue. I'm going to load that up into the airbrush with the Achromatic blue, of course, 50-50 mix. Adding a bit of thinner so it isn't as vibrant on the model. Do the backflow technique to mix it finally. And we're going to lower the PSI to about 25 to 30 here, and we're just going to lightly pull the trigger to hit the blue areas. Now, what we're aiming for here is to get some overspray to go on the grey armour, and this will create a lovely icy glow effect, as you can see. But take your time to build this up. Firstly, to avoid any spider webbing on the model, we do not want that, and so we don't overdo it. And then here is the finished result. Next, we're going to add some Temple Guard blue to our palette. And we're going to block in the sword blade. Just doing this now because I know I need to block in other colours later. It's just a simple blocking in of it. We're going to do 2 thin coats, letting the first one dry. Then we're going to block in some Rhinox hide on the model. So we're going to go onto the kind of sword grip bit there. Next, we're going to add some Desert Yellow from Vallejo to our palette. Thin out with a bit of water there, as you can see. And we're going to block in the sword hilt and the little thing there. This is going to be a kind of base coat for the gold I'm going to add later. And this colour is seriously important. I recommend it to anyone painting gold in large areas. The gold's going to go so nicely over that. It's only going to need 1 coat, really. Next, we're going to put some Gore-4 Brown on the palette. Thin out, and then we're going to start blocking in the kind of trees, further up the trees, just with a brush. Kind of thinning it out a bit more than usual as a layer paint, so we can kind of blend it out from the bottom of the branches. Notice you can see I'm starting the brush stroke further, towards the grey armour, and then pulling it up and towards the leaves. This is for a reason. It's so it kind of creates a transition from the darker grey into that brown. And there you can see the finished Gore-4 blocked in. Now here is some Vallejo Intermediate Green. I'm going to put that on the palette, thin it out. I'm going to basically repeat the process, but starting further up the branches. So It's a bit more thinned out, and we're going to block in the kind of upper halves of the branches and also the leaves. Again, it is thinned out more than usual than a layer paint, just to kind of create that nice transition. And yeah, just go around all the leaves, including this bout thing. Gonna paint that in as well. Don't go too far up the Gorthal brown, and we will be blending that further so it isn't such a stark transition from brown to green. And here is all the green blocked in. Next, we're going to mix some of our intermediate green with our Gorthal brown on the wet palette. One of the reasons why a wet palette is so great is so we can mix colours how we want them, really. And we're going to go and kind of stipple / block in the area between the Gorthal and the intermediate, so it kind of creates a nice transition there. Again, the paint is thinned out more than usual, so it kind of aids the transition instead of it being blocky, block by block. Going to go across all the model again, getting all the tree branches. And here is that done. Next, we're going to add some Caliban green and thinner to my airbrush. Again, we're aiming for a slightly kind of a watery kind of mix. Turn on the PSI on the compressor to around 20. And we're going to just simply add a bit more saturation to the green. So here I'm just using a quick hobo mask. So I'm not going to get that grey armour behind that green there. And as you can see, that dark green has made it look lovely. I'm just going to go around the model now. I've chosen to use an airbrush at this step because I don't have to aim it so close to the grey armour. Next, we're going to replenish our wet palette with a new sheet of paper, add some Temple Guard and some intermediate green, and we're going to create a mix of those two on our palette, as you can see. And then we're going to start doing the kind of the leaves now of this. My intention here is to transition into the blue, but we need to keep some of that green value in so it's not so blocky. So I thinned it out a little bit of water. Well, quite a bit of water. It's kind of like a heavy glaze at this point. And we're just going to start the brush stroke at the base of the leaf and end it at the tip, so it kind of creates that nice transition. Again, we're going to work around the whole model, getting all the leaves. And here is how it looks after all that's done. Next, we're going to use pure Temple Guard blue, load that a bit up onto the palette, get a little fresh pile there. And we're going to basically repeat the same thing, but we're going to start halfway up the leaves and pull towards the tip so it ends on that nice Temple Guard blue. And here it is all done on the model. We're going to wash those green and blue branches we just did. So we're going to add some Army Painter green tone to my artist palette, some flow improver to make it flow more nicely, give that a little bit of mix there. And for the wash, for the blue, we're going to actually use our contrast mix. So we're going to add some Talisar blue and a bit of achromatic blue as well. About a 60-40 mix there. Some flow improver to help it mix. We're going to use a bit more flow improver than we did with the green because contrast paint is super vibrant. We don't want it to overpower the hard work we just did. And basically we're just going to go back and forth between the green and blue. Obviously aiming for the blue at the tips of the leaves where it's blue and the green wash where it's more green. There's no magic trick to this really. It's really easy. We're just going to go back and forth. We're not going to put too much on, just enough coverage. And yeah, we're going to do that across all the branches on the model. We're doing both at the same time so they can kind of blend together. There won't be any tide marks either when it's still wet. And here is all the wash done, but not quite dry. Next, we're going to use some dried bark on the palette. I did originally base coat this lower tree thingy bit here with Goreful Brown, but I didn't really like it, so we're going to go back over that in dried bark. I'm going to kind of blend it, kind of wet blend it now, up to the tip. So we're going to add some Dawnstone in, going to create a nice mix on the wet palette there. And while that dried bark's still drying, still wet, we're going to just run the brush over it, mixing it back and forth on the actual model until it goes onto grey at the end. No science there, just keep going until you get a nice enough transition. So we're going to use some dried bark on the palette and some Rakarth flesh to paint the skulls now. So I want a darker base coat, obviously, because we're going to highlight up, but I'm just going to add some Rakarth flesh into the base coat, as we're going to use that value to highlight up later. And this is just simply blocking in all of the skulls across the model. So the skulls on the trees on his back, and also the skulls on his leaf loincloth thingy. That's done. Now we're going to use 80-20 mix of Rakarth to Dryads. Just add the first highlight here. I'm using a size 2 brush again, my Element Regiment. I'm just going to basically slap this colour on at where the light would shine on it, and a bit further down. It's not really too difficult, and what's made it easier is we're using the same value, the same Rakarth flesh from the base up with our highlights. So not much glazing or blending is needed really. It's kind of just steady layering we're doing this with. We're just leaving that base coat in the deepest recesses, and the shadows, so underneath the skull, and any overhanging bits like the eye sockets. And that's done, as you can see. Next, we're going to use pure Rakarth flesh, and we're going to repeat the same process, but just highlight more towards the zenithal, so just further up on top. And as you can see, it's gonna this methodical layering is going to just give a nice natural look to the skulls. I think it's a much better way of doing it than the way you're taught to, the typical layer, wash, layer again, the same color, edge highlight, edge highlight. This is just a more natural way of doing it, which I much prefer, and it's a lot more fun as well. And that's done there. Next, we're going to quickly put some wash into the skull eye sockets with some strong tone, some quick shade mixing medium, and a little bit of flow improver. This is just to add a bit more contrast in the eye sockets and around the teeth. I'm trying to do this quickly, and this is just a way of dialing back that contrast. I'm not going to use this wash over the head, as it will just make some stains, which we don't want, just into the eye sockets there. I'm using some Temperguard Blue onto my fresh wet palette again, and some Nagarath Night, my favourite purple. We're going to start, and some white grey as well, sorry, some Biovallejo. Little dog there. And we're going to start doing these little tendril thingies on his armpits and other places. So we're just going to start by using our Temperguard Blue to block in the tops of it. We're just going to try and match the colour of the light blue Under Armour. So it's going to use that there at the top. And then next we're going to mix some Nagarath Night with that value. And then, as you probably guessed, we're going to start further down. And this is a great way of just getting transitions without an airbrush, just using the same paints, just mixing on your wet palette to create these this layering, really. It's going to work our way down. Not too difficult, just get some practice in. You can do a bit of glazing at the end to kind of smooth out any transition, but it's just a methodical way of doing these simple transitions. As you can see, I've just gone to pure Nagraph Night here and starting the brush stroke kind of halfway down and ending at the tip where it's going to be the strongest. Again, we're using a smaller brush here, a size 2 element regiment. I decided for this project I wanted to base coat all of the colours before edge highlighting anything, which we'll get to later. And that is all the purple tendril thingies done. So now I'm going to block in the gold sword hilt. So we're going to use scale 75 Alban gold. I'm not going to put on my wet palette as the water makes the paint go weird. I'm just going to block in over that yellow base coat we did earlier, and you can see what a great how great it covers over that. I only need one coat here. If I try to do that over the Dawnstone we airbrushed earlier, it would just be a nightmare. It would get all cloggy. But you've just got a nice smooth base coat from that application. So I'm going to create a wash now using contrast Major's purple and some Glimmer Flesh. About a 70-30 mix of purple to Glimmer Flesh, and adding some thinner into it, as you can see, to make it flow nicely. I love using contrast paints as washes. They're just a lot more vibrant and strong to me. It's a great alternative. So I'm just going to wash all those purple tendril bits we just did. Not overloading the model too much with that. Just take your time, work your way around the model there. And we're also going to wash the gold. And this purple is going to give it a lovely, nice, a nice sheen to it. It's going to look really, really nice. Much more, makes a change to the standard right Glimmer Flesh today, doesn't it? After that is dry, we're going to start glazing some of that purple kind of mix we did, and we're going to start pushing that on the model towards just areas of that hilt. So towards the base of that gold bit on the end, we're going to push the glaze that bit there, and this is just going to add a bit more interest. It's going to shade that metal nicely, create more contrast over it with the purple. Remember to make sure each glaze layer is dry before doing the next, which is why I'm going to work over the whole area of the gold, and then before returning to the first bit I did. Okay, so next we're going to use some Dawnstone. I'm going to stick that on the wet palette. Use some Celeste Grey, and I believe this is we've done our base coat, so we're going to start edge highlighting now. So I'm using my Artist Opus Series S size 1 here, and I'm going to start edge highlighting the grey armour. So I'm using Celeste Grey here mostly on the brush. It can be difficult highlighting these more natural kind of models as compared to like power armour, and I'm just finding the lines on the model. There isn't really a wrong way to do it. If your lines are nice, nice and small and neat, and I'm achieving that by kind of using this high quality brush and also twirling the paint there on my my thumb to make the tip nice and pointy, and just carefully edge highlight the model. I'm pulling the brush stroke. The brush stroke is being pulled towards me, as you can see, and I'm kind of rotating the model and angling it so that's always how I'm going to place these highlights most of the time. And this way I'm going to get nice thin neat lines. As you can see, I always rest my pinky of my painting hand onto the model where it is secure, and this will help improve my accuracy as well. So we're just going to go all over the grey armour with this kind of primarily Celeste Grey until it's done. When I'm getting close to the under armour, I'm adding a little bit of Barrelhoff blue into the Celeste Grey, and this is just to kind of keep in that where the airbrush is oversprayed from earlier with the blue. I'm just kind of keeping the same the same value there. And this is done here. And I'm going to add a second edge highlight now of Celeste Grey and White Grey from Vallejo. This is just going to kind of pop up the model. It's kind of the most fun part of edge highlighting for me, because the first round is the central bit to make the model, frame the model kind of almost. And this is just going to pop out those details. So I'm going to aim towards where the armour is lightest from my airbrush layering. So this bottom of the ankle here. Only a few brush strokes is needed, and it'll take considerably less time to do than the first round of edge highlighting. Work your way carefully across the entire grey armour bit, taking your time. I'm not edge highlighting the kind of rune markings on the grey armour here, as we're going to be doing a cool little OSL effect on them later. And that is done, as you can see. Next, we're going to edge highlight the blue under armour. So I'm going to add some Barrowhoff blue to our palette and mix in some of that Vallejo white grey that was already there from highlighting the grey armour. Again, we're going to do the first round of edge highlights for this with this mix here, and the second round is going to be adding more white into it. But again, same kind of principles as the grey armour edge highlighting. We're just going to kind of find the lines on the model, like next to the recesses and the actual sculpt. Carefully work our way around it, and this will help the blue pop out. Still using Artis Opus Series S size 1 brush. And here is the Under Armour edge highlighted. So yeah, second round of edge highlighting on the blue. So it's going to be a lot of white added to this. I'm just going to kind of go over the first round, like particular areas where the zenithal light is strongest, or the detail needs more attention, and just do kind of smaller lines on, than the first round, and just kind of place that inside them very specifically, not doing everywhere, otherwise what would be the point in the first round. And there you go, that's the blue nicely popped. Next is Goreful Brown back on the palette, which we're going to use to edge highlight the branches with. So we're going to add some Carrack Stone on as well, as I felt the Goreful wouldn't be strong enough. Creating a mix there, as you can see, using my size 1, and we're going to edge highlight the branches. Just small, thin, neat lines, as you can see. And be careful not to go too far into the green, because we'll be edge highlighting that shortly. Just kind of aim for where the branches are. The Goreful Brown we blocked in is the most prominent. Again, going for all the branches, and also this little leaf loincloth thing he has. Next, we're going to use Vallejo Intermediate Green and Citadel Moot Green to mix on the palette and create an edge highlight for the green bits of the leaves. Repeating the same process, but on the green bits of the model. I like creating mixes of my colours to kind of keep the paint scheme consistent. So notice how I added intermediate green into the paint mix there for the edge highlight, and that's because we blocked it in earlier, and it's just going to kind of keep consistency across the model. I'm kind of doing 2 stages of highlighting for this green as well here. So as I've after I've done my paint mix of both those greens, I'm going to kind of dot the corners with pure moot green as well. Now it's time to edge highlight the skulls. I haven't chosen to do the blue leaves yet because I'm handling the model quite a lot, and I know that it's more risky for the paint to chip off, so I'm going to leave that to the end. Just kind of makes more sense, saves a bit of time. But yeah, just going to edge highlight these skulls here. So kind of the brows, a few lines on the top. Don't really need to be too neat, as they are, are natural things. They're not armor. We just want to get our contrast here. So using the ivory and Rackar flesh to highlight. Small lines on all the skulls. Remember to do the backs of them as well. I usually just place a small dot in the center of the highlight we did earlier. Next, we're going to add some Nagarath Night to our wet palette here, and some Vallejo White Grey. Creating a nice mix of these, and you've probably guessed we're going to edge highlight the purple tendril thingies we did. So I'm just kind of working out how bright I want to go here, adding white to my purple gradually, adding a bit of purple back in. And you have to be quite careful here because there's no really edge to kind of scrape your brush across. So this is kind of what I call tracing edge highlights, but we just got to be steady, using our pinky finger to rest against the model. Be gentle on how you do this. Be steady, take your time, and with practice, this will come, I promise. We're not going to start all the way at the top because that is more blue though, as we blocked in earlier, as you remember. So that's the first edge highlight done. So for the second, we're going to add some more white to increase the brightness, which we're going to start further down. And that's the purple done, as you can see. Almost pure white at the tips there. Next, we're going to use some Dark Reaper to put on the palette, and also some Vallejo Scrofulous Brown. Kind of more an orange really, but we're going to mix those up, as you can see in the palette. About a 50-50 mix, I reckon, there. And we're going to start blocking in these mushrooms in. Take that back, it's about a 70-30 mix of the Dark Reaper to the orange. Just going to block those in, very simple. A detail I forgot to block in earlier, but it doesn't really matter. And actually, this is the most fun part of the process for me. In doing little details like this on your models, like taking great care of them, is a great way to elevate the model into a better piece. It kind of pops it out, it gives it interest. Kind of draws the person looking at it to these areas, and if we do these details really nicely, it kind of frames the whole model. So after that base coat's done, I'm going to glaze more pure scrofulous brown towards the starting from the base and towards the edges. It's going to create a nice transition from dark at the base to a more saturated orange here. Do that a couple of times. Remember to move most of the glaze onto your paper towel, otherwise it will just make a mess. I'm doing that. Using my size 2 brush again here. And we're going to add some ivory into our scrofulous brown here. And we're going to use that to edge highlight the mushrooms. So as you can see, I can kind of angle the brush to scrape across the edge here. So I'm rotating the model and simply, kind of sketching in that edge highlight there. I'm going to do a bit of edge highlight lines on the top of the mushroom. Apologies if you can't see it too well, but it's just going to add a nice little bit of extra detail. And then we're going to dot around the edges with an additional highlight, adding more ivory, just to make the mushrooms look nice and speckly. So next we're going to add some Barrowhof blue to our wet palette, and just to edge highlight the blue leaves. Quite simple, just get the perimeter of the leaves. Nothing more to it than that. Being methodical, taking our time to work across the model. Going to do our second edge highlight mix, adding white grey into the Barrowhof blue we did. Apologies for if you can't see it too well on the palette. But we're just going to kind of dot edge highlight the very tips of the leaves there, just to make them pop, give that final look. Working our way across the entire model. And that's all the trees and branches and stuff done, as you can see. Next, we're going to get our palette out, and we're going to add a bit of our Talisar blue and our achromatic blue again. 50-50, going to add a bit of thinner to make it, make it flow better. And we're going to use this to start on our runes across the grey armour. So we're just I'm using the contrast here and the thinner just to make it flow nicely. There's less chance of me making a mistake and overspilling from these cracks and filling in, whilst keeping obviously the same colour we've used on the model already. Just take your time. I'm using a Winsor & Newton size 0 here. I'm carefully filling in the cracks where the runes are across the armour. This is the first step of our OSL effect. If you do make a mistake, you can wipe it off with your finger. Just be careful, as you can see me doing that. And that's all the runes blocked in on the model, as you can see. Well, filled in, I should say. So we're going to create that nice glow. So we're going to add that same mix we had on our palette, the Talisar contrast and achromatic blue, into our airbrush. A bit of thinner, make it flow. And we're going to set the PSI down to 20. And we're going to lightly spray with the trigger on top of the runes we blocked in. Apologies for the airbrush getting in the way, but just few quick bursts, moving on to the next, and then coming back if needed, if it's not vibrant enough, to make sure it doesn't spiderweb. I'm doing the same around the face here, as there'll be a glow coming from the mouth. Be very conservative what you're doing on the face. We're aiming for the mouth and the eye on that. As you can see, that's the model kind of looking glowy, and we're going to kind of fill in these runes, because with OSL, obviously the original light, where the light source originates from, is going to be super bright. So we're going to use some Temple Guard blue on our palette there on the right, and Barrowhof blue. I'm using Temple Guard blue really, really thin down with water here, and we're just going to kind of place it into the cracks. This is great because, one, it will flow quite easily off from the brush using capillary action, and also it won't be as vibrant when it dries. so we can build this up slowly and with care. So work your way around the model, filling in these cracks for the OSL. I did do 2 applications of this, obviously waiting for the first one to dry for it to be, to have a decent effect. And that is there, as you can see. On those wrists, those kind of lower leg bits on his chest. And we're going to repeat the same with Barrowhoff blue, like a really, really thin glaze, about a 80-20 mix from Barrowhoff to water. And we're going to use our size 0 again to place this super thin glaze into the cracks where the runes are. And as you can see, it's already starting to look really nice because we got that quite light blue there from in where the lights are originating from, and we got that lovely saturated glow from where we did the airbrushing. Another reason why the wet palette is so important to me, keeps that paint consistency, active for hours and hours and hours. The reason why I'm using a smaller wet palette is because I like to have lots of room on my painting desk. I've been tempted to buy a big one, like a professional one, a few times, but this does the job just fine. It's just Tupperware, kitchen roll, baking paper. Next, our final kind of glaze highlight for these runes, we're going to add some Vallejo white grey into our Barrowhoff. Again, filling it super, a lot with water, so it's a really, really thin glaze. And we're not going across the whole runes here. It's just where they kind of meet and touch together, and also like the tips. And this is just going to create contrast on the runes, so it's not all just white. It's going to kind of show that it's, more that it's glowing if we do this. Like so. Right, after that's done, we're going to add some of that contrast blue mix into our airbrush. Going to add some to the Temple Guard blue into it, and we're going to start airbrushing kind of the face. And I'm very sorry that the airbrush is blocking it, but as you can see, it's kind of creating a nice glow effect. The PSI is about 20, the mix is thin, and we're going very carefully with that. Adding a bit more white in now, just getting towards the very center. Make sure the PSI is low, can't stress this enough, and the mix is thin. And it's more air that I'm pushing out the airbrush at this point than paint. The air is kind of drying the paint as it lands. And there, as you can see, we've got a nice white glowing effect there. But it was a bit too desaturated for me. So I'm using our blue mix, our Talisar blue, our Aphomatic blue, just to wash that back down. And also it gets in the recesses and, makes the detail stand out. Just getting rid of any coffee staining from our wash there. Using my mouth. I do not recommend trying to get out of that habit, but I didn't have any kitchen roll at hand at that point. I'll need to act fast doing it. So I'm just doing the eye on this mask we're going to glue on very shortly. So we're just going to block it in with Vallejo white grey now with our size 2 brush. Wait for that to dry. And we're going to, again, use our blue mix, our Talisar blue, Aphomatic blue and thinner, just to give it a nice wash. Getting the recesses and create kind of glaze over the eye. Once that's dry, we're going to re-highlight the eye. So we're going to use almost pure white grey, a little bit of white grey mixed to Barrowhoff. And we're going to go down towards the corner, the front corner of the eye there. Still leaving that slightly more blue in the back, and our pure white. Going to dot the very corner of the eye. Like so. Boom. the most fun part of the project, I'm going to glue that face plate onto the model. So I'm using some super glue. We're going to just stick that on an old lid I have, using a paper clip to get accuracy with this. I'm just going to place it very, very carefully where I know the mask is going to cover that, the face with the paper clip. Not too much, we don't want it to don't want it to be runny and run into the areas that's actually going to be shown on the Mini. Yep, got it. Place it on there like that. And there we have the face mask on, looking really great now. I'm really loving how it's looking. Just been handling the mask a bit too much there, so I'm going to re-edge highlight it with a bit of Celeste Grey and White Grey, just on the tips of it, because I rubbed some paint off with my fingers. You know, the face is the bit we want, one of the main features of the model we want the viewer to look at, so it's going to make it pop a little bit more with this white and Celeste Grey mix. Dotting it with a bit more white on the road tips, as you can see. Next, we're going to edge highlight the gold hilt. So we're going to use some scale 75 citrine alchemine for the first edge highlight, and some Vallejo Model Air silver. So first use our citrine alchemine. So we're going to just use the edge of the side of the brush to simply just trace in some lines here. Following the same advice from earlier about edge highlighting, we're just going to, using my pinky to rest on the model, using a size 1 brush here from Artist Opus again. Be careful with how you do this. And be steady. After I've gone around all the gold with this first edge highlight, I'm going to use some Vallejo silver, Model Air silver, to dot the corners and tips of this gold. And that's done, as you can see. Next, we're going to work on the sword. So we're going to add some airbrush thinner into our airbrush cup, followed by some Temple Guard blue, which, remember, is what we blocked in the sword blade with earlier in the video. And then we're going to add some Barrelhoff blue to that mix there. It's about a 70-30 mix of Barrelhoff to Temple Guard. And as you can see, I'm using a mask, so I don't hit the model with any blue overspray, and I'm going to aim this towards the center of the model. Now, this, you have to be very careful with the trigger control here. Build it up slowly, as you don't want to, we need to create space, you know, we need to leave that original value here, so we don't want to kind of just create a new color on the blade. We want to make a nice transition, going brighter in the middle. So I'm using a hairdryer, and we're going to kind of repeat this color a few times, just to kind of build up that initial first glow. So the PSI is on about 20 here, and the mix is very thin for all these layers. So I'm going to use some Liquitex white ink to add into our pre-existing mix from the previous layer we did in the airbrush. And a bit more thinner, and again repeat, aiming more towards the center. It's important to kind of add the white instead of creating you know, cleaning up the cup and stuff and repeating, just so it creates a smoother transition, because we're just building up the values on the originals, if you can see what I mean. Adding a bit more white into the cup, as you can see, and a bit more thinner off screen. We're getting even further into the center now. And it's building up a lovely, lovely effect. We're going to almost pure white now with our Liquitex ink. And this ink is really great instead of just acrylic white, because it really reduces danger of speckling. Now that the transition on the sword is done, we're going to add some Talsar blue and thinner as a kind of wash just for the recesses. This is a pin wash now. I don't want to kind of reduce the vibrancy of that sword. I think it's great how it is. Using our size 1 brush very carefully, just to create a small bit of contrast on that line with our wash. It's mostly diluted, as we're washing kind of white areas at this point. So it's about 80-20 of contrast, Talissar contrast to thinner. And now after that's dried, I'm going to kind of create a OSL glow from the sword. So we're going to get Talissar blue and a little bit of thinner in our airbrush. Again, about 20 to 25 psi. I'm going to aim for the very tip of the sword, both sides, and at the base. And this is going to catch the gold with the overspray here. And it's going to create a lovely little OSL with minimal effort. That's a thing I love about contrast paints. They're nice and translucent, but also vibrant. Like if we tried to do this with a dark blue, it would just ruin it. It would just undo all the work we did with the gold. But this is transparent and it will show our original color nicely. So we're going to edge highlight the gold, the blue blade after our contrast airbrushing. So I'm using barrel half blue on my wet palette and white grey. And I'm going to firstly edge highlight the darker bits with barrel half blue. Adding white as we get toward the lighter bits. I'm just going to use the edge of our brush, wiping off a mistake there, but just working around the entire blade with our brush until it's done. This is relatively easy as long as you take your time with this and kind of angle the model, as you can see, just to scrape the edge of the brush across. Even with these inner bits here, there's still a hard edge for me to trace with that barrel half blue. And yeah, I don't believe I filmed it, but just in the center of the blade, we're just adding more white into our edge highlight. So it's, visible. That's that done. Next, simply we're just going to add a almost pure white grey, a little bit of barrel half in there. We're going to dot the corners of the sword just to give it that final little pop. Nice bit on the very tip there. At this point, I forgot to do a gem on the sword, on the gold hilt, so I'm just going to do that quickly. So we're going to use Nagaraf Knight to add a base coat to this gem here. And as you can probably guess, we're just going to highlight it up with white grey, just gradually adding more white grey, just in the bottom left corner of the gem. So as you can see in my wet palette, adding some white in, using our size 1 artist opus brush, and yeah, angling the model, making that edge highlight nice and easy for us, drawing it towards us with our first application there. Then repeating the same so it's nice and strong. Adding some more white in. Going to try and go even thinner inside our first edge highlight here. Finally, a bit of really, really lighter edge highlight here, and then our point of light reflection, we're going to do in that top corner just a little dot of white grey, and boom, that's that. Finally, I'm going to put a bit of Talissar blue in my airbrush and add some OSL to that end of the gold bit, as I felt it needed it. It was standing out a bit too much. And yes, that is the tutorial done, guys. I hope you have enjoyed it, and this is the finished product, this awesome icy tree lord from Age of Sigmar. In this, I've shown you how we can use airbrushing throughout the entire thing to make the mini look really, really nice, as you can see. And yeah, I hope you've really enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Thank you.